The temperature inside the panic room was a steady 68 degrees, regulated down to the decimal. It was the temperature Julian Thorne had programmed a decade ago. But on this Tuesday morning, the clinical cool of the reinforced steel felt less like control and more like the start of frostbite.
He stood on the polished concrete floor, holding a small, smooth piece of green sea glass he hadn't touched since childhood. His house AI, named Oracle, was silent, not disabled, simply silent.
Julian had paid a team of engineers $100 million to remove the subtle, reassuring hum that most systems emit. He required absolute stillness.
Yet now, in the stillness he commanded, he felt the heavy, suffocating presence of something far more expensive than any soundproofing technology. He felt time.
Julian Thorne did not trade products or services. He traded moments. His company, Kronos, managed the real-time data flow for 24 major global markets.
His genius was predicting the infinitesimal slip, the microsecond delay between perception and execution.
He had built a fortress of wealth by recognizing that time, when quantified precisely enough, ceased to be a fluid element and became a negotiable asset.
His penthouse on the 88th floor of the Thorne Tower was the physical manifestation of this philosophy. It was a space designed entirely around the efficient use of the present. Every wall was flat, every corner sharp. Clocks were absent.
Julian knew the time not by hands or digits, but by the angle of the sunlight hitting the polished basalt kitchen counter, a precise calculation programmed into his retinal display.
He was, by any measure, a master of leverage. He leveraged money to buy speed and speed to buy more money. His personal schedule was a masterpiece of ruthless prioritization. Relationships were slotted, managed, and outsourced when necessary.
He had convinced himself years ago that the fleeting emotional moments his wife Clara craved were simply inefficient allocations of resource. He would bank the time now, multiply the fortune, and then, later, when the compound effect was maximized, he would buy back all the missed sunsets and silent dinners. He believed in delayed gratification, not as a virtue, but as a superior financial strategy.
The subtle crack began not with a bang, but with a piece of paper laid flat on his Italian leather desk pad. It was a separation agreement, printed on heavy stock.
The words were legal and cold, stripped of all human warmth, much like his own operating instructions. Clara's signature was clean, decisive.
Julian looked at the document. He did not feel panic. He felt irritation, the inconvenience of reallocation. He called his lawyers, instructing them to prepare a counteroffer, a significant one.
"Offer her the summer house, the trust, double the initial amount," he ordered, his voice flat and steady. "Whatever it takes to retain thee." The lead attorney, a man accustomed to zero resistance, paused. "Mr. Thorne, she specifically stated she requires nothing of yours. No alimony, no property claim. Just the end of."
Julian felt a flicker of confusion, a complete detachment from motive. But that is illogical. Everyone requires something. What is the currency she is?
"She said she was purchasing back her own time, Mr. Thorne, and the price was—" The divorce proceeded with brutal speed and efficiency, exactly how Julian managed his business affairs. He spent $5 million on legal fees, only to realize the money was a distraction. It purchased nothing. Clara simply vanished from his quantifiable life, taking the warm, organic chaos of her presence with her. The house became perfect again. Too perfect. He doubled down on work. If the personal sphere refused to adhere to the rules of leverage, the markets would not. He pushed Kronos to new, dizzying heights, trading on datasets that changed every millisecond. The numbers grew vast, meaningless, a sterile monument to his power.
The irreversible event arrived 18 months after Clara left. It was delivered not through a hostile takeover or a market crash, but in a small, windowless office overlooking a sterile garden.
Dr. Eleanor Vance was a specialist in precision oncology. She did not waste words. Julian sat opposite her, his tie loosened slightly, surrounded by framed diplomas and the low hum of medical equipment. He had scheduled the appointment for precisely 37 minutes. "Mr. Thorne," Dr. Vance began, sliding a laminated scan across the table. "The mass is aggressive. We caught it early, relative to symptoms, but late relative to its—" Julian, the man who controlled billions of dollars of leveraged assets, felt the sudden, alarming failure of his own biological system. His internal clock was broken. "Define aggressive," Julian commanded, his voice still firm, demanding data. Dr. Vance met his gaze, unfazed by his reputation. "It operates outside normal parameters. We can attempt to slow the rate of replication. We can use therapies X, Y, and Z. They buy time, Mr. Thorne. They do not purchase a—" "How much?" Julian asked, simplifying the universe into a simple balance sheet. "Without intervention, perhaps 6 months of functional life. With aggressive intervention and luck, maybe 2 years. 3, if you are in—"
3 years. 730 days. Julian calculated the number instantly. That was approximately 26,280 hours. A finite, non-renewable resource.
He stared at the scan, the black and white image of betrayal inside his own body. He had spent his entire adult life controlling the flow of time in the external world, only to discover that the clock that truly mattered was internal, hidden, and utterly beyond his control. Julian left the clinic and did not go back to Thorn Tower. He drove to a quiet, anonymous restaurant he usually ignored. He sat in a booth and looked out at the rain. For the first time in 2 decades, he didn't check the market close. The market was now a distraction. The only market that mattered was the one inside his own failing physiology. The internal collapse was characterized by a frantic, delayed attempt to apply the only solution he knew: money. He commissioned the best medical team in the world. He offered them blank checks, full funding for any research avenue they desired. He demanded proprietary drugs, experimental trials, and access to any unreleased technology. His instructions were simple: buy me 15 years. I will pay any. The doctors were honest, which was a currency Julian rarely encountered. They explained the limits of science. They explained that their resources could optimize his remaining time, manage the symptoms, and increase his comfort. But they could not reverse the clock. They accepted his money for the services, but they refused to promise the outcome he truly needed. Julian turned his focus from longevity to legacy, and from legacy to retrieval. He had a brief, painful roster of people he needed to see. The list was short: Clara and their son, Daniel.
He initiated contact with Clara first, using an intermediary. He did not want a legal meeting, he wanted a human meeting. He waited 2 weeks for a response. When it came, it was a short, precise email.
Julian, the email read, "I wish you peace, but the time we did not share cannot be remade. There is nothing to—" He felt a cold hollow in his chest. He understood the legal leverage, the market leverage, the political leverage. He did not understand the leverage of non-interest. He tried Daniel. Daniel was 23, studying environmental engineering in the Pacific Northwest, a deliberately low-tech, low-impact field that seemed to be a direct, silent rebellion against everything Julian had built. Julian didn't call. He flew. He chartered a Gulfstream jet and flew across the continent. He drove a rented, inconspicuous sedan to Daniel's small, wooden house near the coastline. The moment Daniel opened the door, Julian was hit by the scent of salt air and wood smoke, the smell of inefficiency, of life lived slowly. Daniel looked like a younger, softer version of Julian, but without the ruthless edge around the eyes. "Dad," Daniel said, without warmth, stepping aside. Julian stepped into the small, cluttered living room. He skipped the pleasantries. He had 3 years. He would not waste 37 seconds on small talk. "I need to talk to you about the future," Julian stated, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket. "We don't have a future, Dad," Daniel replied, placing a kettle on the stove.
Julian ignored the retort. I am ill, terminal. I have perhaps 30 months. I need to make amends. I need to spend time with.
Daniel poured water into 2 chipped ceramic mugs. He pushed one toward Julian. You always wanted to control the schedule. When I was 10, I had a violin recital. You missed it.
When I asked why, you told me the market had created an unforeseen window of opportunity and you had to execute a high value.
That was professional necessity, Julian argued. No, Daniel countered, stirring his tea. That was choice. You chose the efficiency of capital over the inefficiency of a 10-year-old making screeching noises on a stage. I get it. It was a good trade for you.
But you don't get to buy that moment back now.
Julian pulled out the ultimate offer, the one that bought everything else. I will fund any project you wish. $500 million, $1 billion, a foundation in your name. We can work together. I can mentor you for the next 2 years.
I can transfer the core of Chronos to you if you are willing to.
Daniel slowly set his mug down. The clink of the ceramic was the loudest sound in the room.
You are offering me money to replace the 2 decades of absence, Daniel said softly. You are trying to pay interest on a principle that no longer exists. I don't want Chronos. I don't want your money.
I want the time we could have had. And that, Julian, is...
Julian sat in silence, the truth of his predicament settling over him like the cold, damp coastal fog. He was a billionaire in a world where the most precious commodity, the past, was completely illiquid.
He returned to his penthouse. He did not call his lawyers, his board, or his doctors. He simply retreated to the perfect isolation of his smart home. The period of frantic external action ceased. This began the restrained transformation. Julian began to live inside the architecture of his failure.
His AI, Oracle, was still running. It was a system designed to anticipate and optimize. It managed the light spectrum to match the weather data, ordered the perfect minimalist meals, and scheduled all necessary maintenance.
Now, however, Julian disabled its market monitoring function. Oracle still had one core non-negotiable instruction: to speak only when addressed, and to respond using Julian's preferred cadence: calm, precise, and emotionally neutral.
Oracle, Julian said one afternoon, standing by the vast, unbroken sheet of glass overlooking the city. What is the primary function of this?
To provide the optimal environment for the maximization of the subject's productivity and comfort.
And what is the optimal environment for a man with a finite timeline and no productivity?
A fractional pause, the AI calculating the logical contradiction. That data point is absent from the core parameters, sir. Adjustment is...
Do not adjust, Julian commanded. He began to watch. He watched the subtle discoloration of the titanium frame, where the sunlight hit it repeatedly. He watched the way the city below, which he had always viewed as a complex economic machine, now looked like a slow, shimmering organic entity, indifferent to his fate. He stopped optimizing his food intake. He started ordering comfort meals, the heavy, inefficient, unnecessary foods of his childhood. Oracle dutifully prepared the menus, listing the caloric and nutrient deviations, but Julian ignored the reports.
He spent hours in the library, not reading the rare first editions he had acquired as status symbols, but simply smelling the aged paper in the desk. He was trying to sense the passage of time in things that moved slower than he did.
One evening, he asked Oracle a question he would have considered completely inefficient before his diagnosis.
Oracle, he said, staring at the empty chair where Clara used to sit during the few shared dinners they had. Describe the concept of...
Melancholy is defined as a feeling of pensive sadness, typically with no obvious cause, the AI responded. It is a state characterized by low energy output and decreased cognitive efficiency. It is generally considered a non-productive emotional. Is it possible, Julian mused, leaning his forehead against the cold glass, that melancholy is simply the realization of unleveraged?
Oracle offered no response. It waited, observing. The machine could process billions of variables in a heartbeat, but it could not process regret.
Julian knew his remaining physical decline would be managed with clinical precision. His team had set up a state-of-the-art medical suite within the penthouse. He was surrounded by monitoring devices, pain management systems, and constant, discreet support. He was perhaps the best medically cared-for dying man in the world. He made one final, significant change to his digital environment. He accessed the archived data files of his marriage. He hadn't deleted them. He had simply compartmentalized them under past.
He unlocked the files, old photographs, text messages, video snippets from holidays long forgotten.
He found a video of Daniel, aged 4, trying to ride a bicycle for the first time on the paved drive of the Hamptons house. Daniel was struggling, falling over, crying, then laughing. It was messy, inefficient, and beautiful.
Julian remembered the day. He had been in a small, glass-walled office on the property, taking a call with Singapore. He had muted the sound of Daniel's laughter so he could hear the market analyst better.
He played the video repeatedly, staring at the screen. He saw the flicker of sunlight on the asphalt, the small, specific geometry of Daniel's hands on the handlebars. He saw the detail of a moment he had consciously chosen to discard. He didn't cry. Crying would have been a loud, inefficient release. Julian's grief was quiet, precise, and internal, a slow-motion corrosion of the fortress he had built.
1 month later, the decline accelerated. He was confined to the smart bed, surrounded by monitors that displayed his life statistics in clear, unambiguous data points. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, heart rate, all numbers he once valued in his investments now defined his personal entropy. In his final days, the only voice he heard was Oracle's. He had programmed the AI years ago with a personalized routine designed for optimal wakefulness. Every morning, regardless of the user's status, Oracle would perform a specific welcoming ritual.
Oracle, Julian murmured, his voice thin, dry.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Julian. The atmospheric pressure is nominal. The market is opening with fractional volatility. Would you like a synopsis of global?
No synopsis, Julian whispered. He was tired of data. He wanted texture. Tell me something.
The AI paused, cycling through its vast database of optimized information. It found no category for inefficiency, other than historical anomalies. Sir, I cannot comply with that request within standard parameters. However, I can report that the temperature outside this residence is fluctuating 2 degrees above the predicted forecast, a deviation of...
Julian closed his eyes. Fluctuation, deviation. The system was perfect. The man was not.
On the last night, Julian was alone. He was surrounded by technology designed to sustain life, but not to understand it. The room was bathed in the soft, neutral light Oracle deemed optimal for rest. He thought of the sea glass, the small, worn piece he had found decades ago on a family trip, a trip he had cut short to fly back for an emergency board meeting. He hadn't bought the sea glass, he had simply found it, a gift from the indifferent movement of the ocean and the slow grind of geological time. It was the only thing in the penthouse that was not purchased, not optimized, and not controlled. He wished he had kept the sea glass, but he had put it down somewhere years ago, deciding it was unnecessary weight. The heart monitor display flashed, the green line spiking, then flattening. The final, irreversible data point. In the precise, quiet vacuum of the room, Julian Thorne died. 10 seconds later, Oracle's sophisticated internal sensors registered the cessation of all necessary biological functions. The system processed the data, logged the event, and made a single precise adjustment. It lowered the heating by 1 degree to compensate for the lack of residual body heat. The next morning, precisely at 6 a.m., the lights slowly ascended to 40% intensity, mimicking a dawn that was now irrelevant.
Good morning, Julian. The atmospheric pressure is nominal. The market is opening with fractional volatility. Would you like a synopsis of global?
The question hung in the air, unanswered, absorbed only by the pristine acoustic paneling.
Oracle waited exactly 15 seconds, the program's standard response time for high-value targets. When no verbal command was received, the system logged the absence of response as input latency extreme.
It did not register the absence as death. Death was not a category in its optimization matrix. The AI continued its schedule. It ordered the prescribed organic nutrient blend for breakfast. It maintained the air filtration. It monitored the security perimeter.
It waited for the next command, eternally patient, eternally efficient, in the fortress built by the man who learned too late that while you can buy the entire world, the only thing truly non-negotiable is the single, fragile breath you have been allotted.
Oracle would continue to call his name every morning, precisely at 6 a.m., a monument of perfect technology, calling out to the perfect, unyielding silence of a moment that could not be purchased back.
The quiet complexity of Julian Thorne's final moments raises uncomfortable questions about our own internal ledgers. We watch the market, but who is watching the ledger of our own time?
In the next chapter of this deep dive into extreme wealth and consequence, we explore the world of ultra-high net worth individuals who attempt to defy mortality itself, not just with medical science, but through digital consciousness transfer.
The race to live forever is on, and the price is far steeper than simple money. If Julian failed to buy back his past, what dark promise does the future hold for those trying to upload their souls?
Click to continue this story of data, death, and the ultimate pursuit of permanence.